Hey, Crown Corner family. Welcome back to your favorite spot for the most intriguing and jaw-dropping stories around. Today, we've got a lineup of tales that are sure to have you on the edge of your seats. From unbelievable to petty revenges, these stories showcase the wild and unpredictable nature of life. So grab your snacks, settle in, and let's dive right into these incredible narratives. I drive for rideshare. Pretty sure we all know which one. While in the waiting lot, there could be hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of us, and I would say maybe 3 of those are female. I am one of those females. So the lot can get quite interesting with a bunch of sexist men who like to come over and tell us how we're supposed to be doing things. This one guy comes over, and I won't say he's a great guy, but lesser of two evils sort of deal. Tolerable enough to talk to. I'm not against men in general, just this particular crowd is not the best. We talked for a bit, and he eventually asked if I wanted to go get some lunch with him. Sure, why not? Especially since he insisted on paying because that's what men do, he said. He proceeds to tell me the entire time how I can't have breakfast for lunch, and I shouldn't eat carbs because I'm a woman, and I shouldn't drink soda coos. It's going to make me fatter, etc. I barely tolerate it because I was listening to some tips and tricks from him on how to supposedly be more efficient and make more money. Spoiler alert. He was only actively working about a third of the time he claimed to be working and put more miles on his car than he also claimed because he only did airport and will always drive back empty-handed. I saw him several days later, and he literally went out and bought me an iPhone saying it was better than my Android, claimed no strings attached. I knew that was nonsense and refused to get rid of my Android, but I was curious what the strings were. I kind of like to see these things long enough to see what the catch is. Next day, he starts demanding how I need to turn on the tracking so that he can always see where I am. He claims it's because it's my safety, because as a woman I could get killed doing rideshare, and therefore he wants to know where I am all the time. Obviously, I refuse this. Fast forward, and I keep missing him at the waiting lot because I was going to give him back the phone. But he's constantly texting me, giving me these tips and tricks, and tell me what days of surge. But he's also berating me if I'm not working 24 hours a day, and berating me for not being up at 3 in the morning, and berating me for taking off one day of the weekend. I only didn't block him because I felt obligated to return the phone. One morning, he texted me about a buddy of his who took a lot of rides down to the airport for all this businessy stuff, and how he would pay $100 for the same type of trip that the rideshare would only give me about $35 for, and that he always tipped well and blah, blah, blah. I figured, hey, sure, why not? Plus, he said that he couldn't do it because he was taking another buddy to the airport at the same time, so we will be at the airport lot at the same time, which means I could finally give him back his phone and then block him. Over the next 2 days before the trip, he spammed the hell out of me, suddenly changing his mind about things. Well, now his buddy needed me to be there an hour earlier. Now his buddy wanted me to have his car at a certain temperature. Now his buddy demanded that I have the car cleaned interior and exterior right before picking him up. Now his buddy says that I have to buy fresh water, bottles of smart water for him. Now his buddy says I have to go buy official receipt papers in order to write out the receipt so he can submit it to his business to get the money back from the rideshare. And every single time he sends these warnings about how I better not screw it up because he would be the one blamed. Cue petty revenge. And this one is a 2-parter. Petty revenge, part 1. Knowing that his buddy always left for the airport about 2 hours prior to when he needed to be, I kept acting like I was seriously going to pick his buddy up. I didn't. Didn't even read all the messages asking if I was on my way and why it was late and that I hadn't shown up, etc. While I knew his buddy probably didn't deserve that, I knew that this jerk would get blamed because he was the one responsible for the ride. I also knew his buddy had plenty of time to call for another ride and still make his plans, so a minor inconvenience at most. I left the original jerk unblocked just because I was dying of laughter of all the panic he was going through. It was like the stages of grief, from depression to anger, and it was bargaining in there and pleading and disbelief, thinking I was just joking and I was actually there and all this stuff. Petty revenge, part 2. Did you forget I still had his super expensive iPhone? Here's the even better part. I don't know why, but for some reason his iPhone account was under his mother's name. So while he apparently could buy new phones, he couldn't exchange or change anything on the account. I knew this because he had lost his old iPhone, and he wasn't able to redeem the warranty or whatever it was. His mother, by the way, was not quite all there in the head and was unable to leave the house and go with him. I don't know all the details of how the whole iPhone thing account works, but I know that it was under his mother's name. So I went to an Apple store a couple of towns away when I was over there, and I claimed that I'd found this lost iPhone. I told them I didn't know who it belonged to. They said no problem. They would contact the owner. Except here's just the cherry on top of the icing. The only phone number registered for the lost, or whatever was the one on the phone that the guy had previously lost. He never added the new phone numbers, even though you think Apple would have automatically done so, because he wasn't allowed to without his mother being there. This is why he had to create a whole new Apple ID, because he couldn't get his back, because Apple could only verify the account and information from the original phone number, from the phone he didn't have in the first place. I even asked the person at the Apple store what would happen if the only phone number on the account for contact wasn't usable or accessible. He assured me that as long as the account owner came in, then they could look up the account and find the phone for them. Just to double, make sure I asked what if the account holder's relative or husband or wife came in. They said only if they were on the account. He wasn't. This was about 2 years ago, and I bet he still never got his phone back. Back in the early 90s, I worked at a video game store. You've never heard of it. Trust me. Like most stores of this kind in the early 90s, we had several TVs and consoles set up and allowed people to try games. As one would naturally expect when kids walk by a store and seek other people playing Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo Entertainment System, and Genesis games, they want to play too. As one would also naturally expect, this caused a number of loitering children to hang about the store all day begging to ask to play games. Finally, the owner has had enough. We're told not to allow anyone not an adult to play any games until after 1 p.m., and no unaccompanied minor is allowed under the age of 13 to keep most of the littler kids away. One morning, I'm opening the store, 10 a.m., straightening displays, dusting shelves, etc. When a woman comes into the store with 2 little kids, maybe 8 or 9, bends over and gives them each a peck on the cheek and starts to leave. Me, calling after her. Excuse me, you can't leave your kids here. I'll be back in a couple hours. I have an interview. Me, we're not babysitters and we're not here to watch your kids. They'll be fine. They just want to play the games. I really gotta go. Entitled, Mother Proceeds to Leave. Me, practically yelling down the mall. You can't leave them here. We're not here to watch your kids. Entitled, Mother Keeps Walking. I called the owner, and the owner said he calls security. I call security. Security calls police. 10 minutes later, and 2 officers show up and eventually get name information, etc. Out of kids. Police confirm Mom is not, in fact, in the mall. I told them she said she'd be back in a couple of hours, so an officer came up from a station across from the store to await return. A little before 1 p.m., Mom comes back in the store and starts freaking out because, surprise, surprise, her kids are gone. Officer arrests Mom. Mom is taken from mall in handcuffs. I heard later that the kids were given to the father for custody, and Mom was charged with child endangerment. I left the store shortly after that. I heard later that several others had tried to drop kids off at the store for babysitting. The new retort was, yeah, you can leave them here, but the last mom that did got arrested. So last night I finished up my shift as an EMT, and it's been a long and tiring one. The calls weren't bad, but there were a lot of them, and we were all over the county. Shift is over. I change back into my comfy clothes, sweats, t-shirt, hoodie, and I head to the store to get something for dinner. I get there just in time since they're closing in 10 minutes. I assure the cashier that I was just grabbing something quick, and I go and pick up a lasagna from the frozen section. I grab them and turn to head to the checkout when I hear a, not a throat-clearing sound, but someone saying it like they were reading it out loud. Turn and look to see a woman, and she snaps off I need you to go in the back and get me a pack of the frozen pretzels. I say that I don't work here and point out where an employee just went behind an end cap. Woman snaps. You do work here and you need to stop being lazy and get me my pretzels. I again say I don't work here and turn to walk to the self-check. She flips her mind and storms off, muttering about lazy employees and managers. I finish checking out and I'm grabbing my stuff and leaving when I see her again with her cart and a manager, and she yells there, "She is!" That's the lazy witch, and starts towards me. I'm not even going to engage, and so I hold up my receipt and my one item to the self-check girl and walk out. I hear the manager raising his voice and saying, Ma'am. Turns out she left her cart behind and stormed out of the store to confront me. I get in my car to drive off, but she's standing in front of it, so I can't go anywhere. She's also giving me a tongue lashing that I'm too checked out to really pay attention to. Great, I'm already on my last nerve, and this woman's hate it. Manager sticks his head out of the door and hollers, "Mom?" She turns and makes a shushing motion towards him. He hollers, "Ma'am." One more time, and she hollers back saying, "I'm dealing with your employee since you're too much of a little witch to do it yourself." He bristles and says, "Madam." She cuts him off with "Shut up," screeched at the top of her lungs. He shrugs, and I watch him go back inside, fiddle with the locks, flip the sign to close, and pull down the shades. As I'm watching this, she gets annoyed that I'm not paying her my full attention, and she yells, "What the hell are you looking at that's so damned important to ignore me?" I just pointed at the shop and say they just closed and locked the doors. I'm not sure what she screamed since it was pretty incoherent, but she did run towards the door. Seeing my chance, I drove off, leaving her pounding on the door and cursing. This is a weird story that just happened over the weekend. Thought y'all might enjoy it. So, Saturday night, the missus and I are lying in bed, trying to go to sleep when I hear some noise from the back door. Storm door opens and slams shut. I'm not fully asleep yet, so I put on pants and a shirt I can find and grab my trusty shotgun. We moved to the mountainside, and most of the area is still wooded, and living in such conditions, wild animals are an issue. We have bears, coyote, raccoons, and bobcat, to name a few. So as I move into the back door, I hear a window break in the back garage. I look out and see someone breaking into my garage. I scream for the wife to call the sheriff's office. Around here, 911 doesn't work well for breaking in. We are connected with a couple of counties, and it gets confusing for them. We get quicker response by calling them directly. I'm now in go mode thinking some meth head is trying to score some tools for some quick cash. Got out of the house and noticed this person's truck still running. I did the only thing I could think of and took the key out of the truck and put it in my pocket and waited for the deputies to show up. Took them 20 minutes to show up. One was state police, the other was a local sheriff deputy who was doing radar 10 miles up the road. My wife and I know them both. With my gun in hand, I told them someone was in the garage, and I haven't approached it yet, but here's the key to the perp truck. They go in, guns donned out, and deal with the situation. The dude was passed out on an old bench seat for an old truck I have by the tool bench. They woke him up and arrested him with little to no issues other than him screaming profanity at them. They told me that I can press charges and to come in on Monday to file the paperwork. He's not getting out anytime soon since, on top of his breaking in, he's being charged with a DUI. Yesterday, I spent the day traveling trying to fix the window this jerk broke since no stores that are open Sunday in my local area. While on my travels, I'm fuming at the fact that I'm having to do this repair on a piece of junk door from the 70s. My wife was telling me to maybe let him go with a warning, but I'm having none of it. So this morning I went to the sheriff's office. The same deputy was there that arrested the perpetrator. So I asked him how the ride with the dude was. This is the version the officer gave me. Officer, why did you break into the garage? Perp, I was trying to get my stuff back, but someone changed the lock. Officer, you know they purchased that place from Kevin 2 years ago, right? Perp, what? That doesn't give them the right to change the lock without telling me. Officer, yeah, they can. You ain't been in that house for like 4 years, and I was the one who got you out of that house because you beat the hell out of your old lady. That's twice I get to arrest you on the same property. Perp, but he shouldn't be entitled to change the lock, though. Where else am I supposed to go? A little backstory on the property. We purchased it from Kevin, who's a school board member, and gave us a decent deal on the property. He had the property as a rental for his nephew for a few years. When his nephew started walking in his dad's footsteps by getting drunk and beating his girlfriend at the time, he evicted him from the property 2 years before we purchased it. When he evicted him, he emptied the content of the garage as all scrap metal. He found that out Sunday morning when his uncle paid him a visit in jail. Kevin had other renters on the property after he sold it to us because he didn't want the responsibility of it anymore. He's being charged with trespassing, criminal trespassing, breaking and entering, driving under the influence and property damage of less than $500. Quick pause, folks. If you're loving these stories, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to K-Korner, and drop a comment below. Your support means the world to us and helps keep this channel thriving. Plus, it's a great way to join our community and share your thoughts on these wild tales. All right, let's jump back into the action. I had the misfortune of working for Goodall Restaurant in for 5 years as an assistant manager. I worked torturous hours and put up with unbelievably rude people, and all for $7 an hour. What more could you ask? One time, a drunken idiot actually drove his van through the double doors and halfway into the dining room, spraying the horrified patrons with glass and antifreeze. I cheered. He was arrested. Nobody was hurt. Anyway, I worked under an incredibly obese woman who was the manager and in these days and times would have been convicted of sexual harassment, had then been now. There were 2 other assistant managers, an ex-Marine with the IQ of a Jell-O pudding bar and a 3-time divorced horror named Sue, who my friends and I had affectionately dubbed Trog. As luck would have it, ex-Marine and Trog became boyfriend and girlfriend, and subsequently my nemesis. So here's the scenario. One extremely large woman with the hots for me, one ex-Marine drooling down his time most of the time, and one unpleasant Trog-type woman constantly exploring ways to make my life miserable, like making me work the 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. shift, 4 days a week. It was a nightmare. My clothes smelled like hamburger and grease all the time, and so did I, even after a shower. I was constantly tired and unsure of what day it was half the time. So, after almost 3 years of putting up with this crap, I finally snapped and plotted my revenge and my exit from service. I need to explain exactly how the cash register and video monitor system works in order for you all to thoroughly appreciate what happens next. When the cashier enters in a customer's order, it appears on a video monitor over the appropriate workstation. So, if you order a hamburger, fries, and a Coke, the video monitor over the fryer station says 1 fries, the video over the grill says 1 hamburger, and the video over the front counters says 1 fries, 1 hamburger, 1 Coke. And then a receipt tape comes out with all the info on it, which the person bagging the order uses and has to give to the customer when done. Another thing you need to know is that certain items are only available at certain times. Dinner items are only rung up after 6 p.m. at night, for example. So this is the shenanigan that I pulled off. A holiday weekend was approaching, and the manager was taking the week off to go to Lake Tahoe. That left Trog, Butthead, and myself to work the store and its 25 employees. Well, after the manager left, they decided that they would take the weekend off and stick with me. Basically, around-the-clock duty, bastards. It was like July 4th weekend, and I was screwed. So here's what I did. I was going to be stuck working Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They were going to leave Friday evening at 7 p.m. when my shift began and take off to Monterey. So that Thursday evening, I worked until 4 a.m. Being alone in the store, I had uninterrupted access to the computer system that you use to program the cash registers. I methodically went through and reprogrammed all titles for the dinner keys. Chicken dinner now said Sue is stinking troll. Fish dinner now said Ron is big jerk, etc. There were a total of 5 dinner keys, I think, and I programmed them all with these niceties. 8. I then tossed the programming guidebook into the dumpster, just in case. Nobody else, except myself and the manager, knew how to program the registers. Grin now. I had to rely on a bit of luck as well, because I needed to pick up my paycheck the following day at lunchtime, and it would be disastrous if someone accidentally hit a dinner key during the day. So the following day, I appeared at noon to get my paycheck, and all my personal effects at the store. And everything went by without incident. Trog Gew Company. Made a few snide remarks about how much fun they were going to have in Monterey all weekend, and I cheerfully ignored them and wished them a great time. I was able to put together the whole story several months later when I ran into one of my old employees. And this is what happened. It came as quite a shock to them when, at 6 p.m., I still hadn't shown up for work. I was, in fact, at the grand opening of Margaritaville in San Francisco about that time, well into my 4th margarita and feeling no pain. Keeping close watch of the time, I called the restaurant promptly at 6:05 p.m. Me. Hello? Trog. Jim? Where are you? Me. Why, I'm in San Francisco enjoying my 4th margarita. How are you this fine evening? Trog. What the hell does that mean? Me. Oh, hey, aren't you guys leaving for Monterey shortly? Better get cracking. Trog. Hold on a second. Sound of phone dropping. Suddenly, wild laughter erupts in the background. Something like jerk. Oh my God. Can be heard. Trog. Oh, you son of a witch. Oh, me. Well, my drinks just arrived. Have a nice weekend. Trog. Oh, me. Do something about that stutter, would ya? Me. Toodles. Click. The timing was perfect. About 30 seconds into my phone call, the first dinner item was rung up, extolling the virtues of her boyfriend's morals. Laugh the phrase, Ron is a big jerk, appeared on the register tapes over the grill and fryers and over the front drive-up window. Plus, the employees had to give the receipt to the customers. The place was packed. Dinner rushed in full swing. All the dinner items being rung up were showing at all workstations in the restaurant with all the different things I'd programmed showing up. Needless to say, Trog and Butthead worked around the clock all weekend long. Because the manager was out of town, and they didn't know how to reprogram the register keys, they had to leave my programs running until past midnight, when the district manager for the restaurant called in to reprogram all the registers. I was an instant hero with all the employees at the store, some of whom I still see up to this day. I lucked out and was hired where I work now and have been here for 8 years. I will never, ever work in a fast food restaurant again. Last year, while I, then 25-year-old male, was working with digital design for a friend, he asked me to design something for a lady friend of his who owns a bar and was thinking of beginning fresh. She wanted a simple design for her menu. It was going to be 1 page only since there aren't many appetizers anyway, and didn't have much money thanks to the pandemic, so I was willing to work pro bono. Let's call her Nicole, 27-year-old female. Nicole was messaging me about every sort of art she found on Pinterest, saying how cute some were, and if I could do it like this one, etc. If you ever worked with designers, they strongly dislike when you dictate their work. You're welcome to choose patterns and positioning and whatnot, but bear in mind that it's best if they don't copy someone else's artwork. Anyway, I made 3 versions exactly like she asked. Took me around 5 days to design because she didn't like the picture that she took or something. It happens. I was okay with it. Design 1 was too colorful. She didn't like too many colors. There were 3 main colors. 2, I don't remember what she said about it. And 3, oh, I love it. Thank God it was over. But could you remove this table at the bottom? Also, the character doesn't represent my bar that much. While my degree was something out of a YouTube tutorial, I could call myself a designer since most of my clients love my work and some professionals were over the moon when I showed any of my projects. I never studied for real because it wasn't my career, but I digress. Nicole's sister, Nathalie, 20-year-old female, on the other hand, read a book and was ready for the workplace. No, really, she read one book about design and color theory. She went to Nicole and demanded to know why she wouldn't come to her in the first place. Long story short, I was in a group chat with Nicole and Nathalie, being bombarded with JPEGs of many cute characters holding plates. And then, on the third day, it came. The atrocious menu, as I like to call. It was my third design without the table at the bottom, with a children's font, think Comic Sans, but illegal, and a brunette cartoon girl holding a plate. I swear I've seen that girl somewhere. Nicole loved it. The only problem, apart from the rest, was that where the table was colored red on an attempt to erase it, and the girl was outlined white. Nathalie told me to fix it. One reverse image search from Google told me that the same mascot girl was used on a big food blog from her city, XYZ Foodies. Not real name, of course. That's where I knew that mascot. I messaged both of them asking if they were really sure they wanted to use the mascot. They were. They were very well. I changed my original design to match the desired one, and voila. I also changed my standard contract to register the design under Nicole's name with full responsibility. Thanks, Reddit, for this knowledge. Contract signed and copied, art delivered, case closed. Until 3 months later, I received a letter on my mail. Oh, I was being notified. It was faster than I expected. The original artist for the blog's mascot was suing me. It wasn't a formal sue. I just don't know the term in English, but his lawyer went and told me I did something wrong. I contacted my mom's lawyer, and she was a little concerned. Copyright is really bad, and most lawyers were not equipped for it because it's uncommon to us non-famous people. I told her about the storm of the previous semester, and she was 8. Let me tell them. The gist was that while I indeed designed the menu, and eventually the same mascot was used for the logo, I was 0% responsible per agreement. And another 3 months went by before I woke up to my cell phone having a seizure from the incoming texts and calls. Nicole and Nathalie were pissed. What the hell? Why are we being sued because of your design? And solve this mess right now. Me. I'm sorry, what happened? Nicole. I'm being sued? I just received the notification at my bar. Me. Is it the design? Nicole. Yes. What did you do? Did you do this to me? Why? Why? Me. I didn't do a thing. I just did what you and Nathalie asked for. Nathalie. What? Why are we being sued then? Me. Possibly because you used the character from XYZ Foodies. Nathalie. Using another character on a design doesn't do this. You told XYZ Foodies, didn't you? Me. Why would I do that? The girl goes around the city trying every new bar and restaurant. I even asked if you two were sure about using the art. There was a meeting with their lawyer. I think he also read one book, might be 2. My lawyer, Nathalie, Nicolay, me, and the friend I was working with, invited by Nicole herself. The dude was saying stuff about design being the artist's responsibility and stuff like that. My lawyer, bless her heart, pulled a copy of my single-page contract stating clearly I, the client, take full responsibility for the design and everything that comes with it. The line is longer. I'm just lazy to look up the entire clause. After she read it out loud, everyone was quiet until Nicole opened her mouth. Nicole. So, how are you going to help us? My lawyer. We aren't. Their lawyer. We can close a deal. You pay 50% of any legal fees incurred from the dispute with XYZ artist, and we won't sue you. My lawyer. Or we can shake hands and you leave my client alone, because if you sue and lose, we are going to court again for emotional damage and emotional distress at work for my client. Are we clear? Their lawyer. Have it your way then. And with a smirk, the dude left. My lawyer, confused, just sat there organizing her 2 papers, and the sisters were sitting there, arms crossed and annoyed looks on their faces. My friend looked at Nicole and said, Friend, you know you're in the wrong, right? Nicole sighs. I'm sorry, Churros Man. Thank you for your time. We left and I never heard from Nicole or Nathalie again, except for the time I went to her bar and saw that the sign was just Nicole's bar with a beer company logo. This time, it was legal. She was not happy to see me. I am 17 years old and I convinced my parents to let me get a motorcycle. I had to buy it with my own money, unfortunately. There is a town that's about 8 miles away that had a nice state park that I was taking pictures at. It was warm, 75 degree. I stopped in the town at the gas station to fill up before heading back. I was about to fill up when this lady on an Escalade yelled something, entitled Mother, "Hey, my son, ride your toy." This kid is about 12, wearing a backwards monster hat and an easy 5'5", 250 pound. Me, this isn't a toy. Entitled Mother, just let him ride it. Me, no way flipped Vizor back down witch. Entitled Mother, I heard that. My son rides dirt bikes, he promises he won't crash it. Me, no lady, your child cannot. I went inside to piss and buy some water and pay for my gas, and I pulled my bike up into a parking spot next to the building. I put my debit card into the chip reader, look back, and this witch let her son on it and are standing next to it. I walk out once I paid and said in my big boy voice, "Me, what are you doing?" Entitled Mother, letting him sit on it since you were too stuck up to let him ride it. Child of Karen, Mom, I want one? Entitled Mother, you don't want this one's ugly. Me, it's a cafe racer, so that's the style. Entitled Mother, let my kid ride it? He hasn't ridden in a couple weeks because he crashed his dirt bike? Me, hell no. You jerk, you don't even need it. What do you even use it for anyway? Me, to ride? Entitled Mother, you don't need it. Me, it's mine so. Dumb kid, you probably stole it anyway. Me, nah, I bought it with my money. At this point, I was mad, so was she. She took her kid's hand and pushed me and my bike over. I was still in my parking spot. I yelled a couple words at her, something about how her and her kid should eat crap and die. I collected myself, turned my bike on, checked for damage, and rode around the gas station to the exit. That's when I saw her car, and I thought my fist looked good on her side mirror. I proceeded to doink it off and haul butt back home in hopes to lose her. I was very wrong. My bike isn't fast. It was about the same speed as the Escalade she was driving. I have an intercom system in my helmet that lets me make calls and listen to music. I called my dad, the former deputy chief of police, and now the director of 911. Oops on her, my dad had 2 of his men ready for when I went into town. While this was going on, this lady kept getting really close to me. I think she was trying to hit me. I was doing close to 95 miles per hour on the way back. We got into town, and one cop pulls me over, and the other pulls the lady over. I get off my bike and walk towards the first squad. Cop 1, was she chasing you? Me. And she pushed my bike over and threatened my life. Cop 1 chuckles. We walk to the back of the first squad, and I see the lady fighting the cop. Cop 1 runs over to assist his buddy, and this lady is doing that "do you know who I am? I'll have all of you fired and put in jail. My husband is a Marine." Entitled Mother, he stole my son's bike. Cop 1, holding back laughter with a big smile on his face. Oh, really? So why is that kid over there wearing motorcycle gear? Entitled Mother, flabbergasted that someone saw through her nonsense. It's not my fault. Cop 1, oh, okay, handcuffs, lady. Cop 2, do you want to press charges? Me, well, of course. Cop 1, puts the lady in squad car. Entitled Mother, nonstop screeching. At this point, I called my dad and told him what had happened. The entitled Mother didn't mention the mirror I had launched, luckily. I went home and waited for my dad to get home. He told me she was charged with reckless driving, child endangerment, assault, disorderly conduct, and I think something about killing someone. I feel like World War II's chalk of military stories is one of those bottomless veins of gold, where you discover more the more you dig. This story comes to us from my grandfather, from whom I inherit my love of pranks, most of my sense of humor, and probably my deep appreciation for schadenfreude. Like many of his stories, I heard this one as a kid many times, usually in front of a fire with snow falling outside, and always accompanied by an eye roll and a tart comment or two from my long-suffering grandmother. Gramps was a master machinist going into the war, and he had quite a bit more experience than most people with engines and engineering. He was one of those guys that would look at just about anything mechanical with both reverence and a critical eye for making it better, and his knack for success inspired the Army Air Corps to snatch him up and plop him back down in the Midwest as a crew chief. My understanding, and I don't have any military experience here, but this is what I've been told, is that the senior NCO in charge of the maintenance, repair, upkeep, and general functioning of a squadron is the guy that actually owned those planes. From what Gramps always said, his attitude was that he loaned the pilots his planes, and they were expected to bring them back in roughly the same condition as they were in when they went up. When they were on the ground, the aircraft and everything used to maintain them was part of his kingdom. One fine day, a very new, fresh out of the box lieutenant, still with that new officer smell, introduced himself to Gramps and the other guys in the unit as they were sitting in back of one of the maintenance bays, sharpening up a big double set of drill bits that had been getting more use than usual. And by introduced, I mean came in shouting about how they were doing it all wrong. He knew all about what they were doing, of course, and so just knew that the drill bit sharpening they were doing was actually going to ruin the bits and waste war resources. And did they want the Krauts to win? He showed them all the right way to do it, and wasn't going to take any lip. My grandfather was not the sort of guy that was able to keep his mouth shut, which is probably another reason they put him in charge of mechanical things that tended not to get uppity with him. I also inherited this congenital condition, but that's a separate tragedy entirely. He protested that the lieutenant's direction actually was incorrect, and got about 2/3 of the way into what he was about to say before the officer decided that he'd had enough back, talk, and gave him weekend night shift guard duty. Gramps eyeballed him a bit and would always say at this point in the story that he felt compelled to obey the lieutenant because he was just so shiny, so he smiled and said, "Yes, sir," shut his mouth, and that was that. This was well before the Army had put tons of resources into things that weren't war critical. The airbase Gramps was stationed at was essentially a dirt grass airfield, with hangars plopped down, and utterly without any pretense at pavement anywhere in sight. Consequently, the main traffic artery right behind the hangars, and which one had to go down when entering or leaving the base at all, was parallel to the airstrip and was the sort of thick, gooey, sticky mud that one gets in Nebraska when it's been raining a lot and people have been driving Army. Jeeps over the same patch of ground repeatedly. About halfway down, in the middle where the traffic had been heaviest, there was what Gramps described as a puddle, and which he later clarified was nearly 300 feet long, 30 feet wide, totally unavoidable, and which would swallow up the unwary interloper who didn't keep going. Go. Too fast or too slow and you're screwed one way or the other. Go through slowly and don't stop, and you'd probably be okay. Gramps positioned himself on Saturday night with his rifle and, grimly determined to protect this Nebraska air base in the middle of nowhere from the Huns, waited about 2/3 of the way down this Charybdis-like vortex, and waited. Lieutenant Shiny, along with a lot of the other guys on the base, really liked taking his weekend pass in town because there were girls there, which any self-respecting soldier knew was an opportunity one did not lightly pass up, and which was the reason that Gramps had been assigned weekend. Sentry duty is just an extra little screw you. Pretty soon, Lieutenant Shiny came trundling back to base, and not in an Army Jeep. Oh, no. His family evidently had money or pull or something because he had an actual nice car to get around in, with those big swoopy fenders and the floorboards just outside the doors on both sides. He was playing it safe, Gramps said, by not driving down the middle of the road masquerading as a muddy pond. He was going along the side where it wasn't quite as deep, and he was less likely to get stuck. But that also meant that the driver's side of the car was almost overhanging the deepest part of the mud. You can probably see where this is going. The duty of a sentry, of course, is to stop anyone they don't recognize from being on the base or near anything vital. And while Gramps knew perfectly well that Lieutenant Shiny was where he was supposed to be, he also knew that there was no way in hell during wartime he was going to get questioned about it. So he advanced just as Lieutenant Shiny got abreast of a particularly bad spot and hollered halt in his best drill instructor voice. It got the message across and the car stopped immediately. Danger, Will Robinson. Window rolls down. Top of Lieutenant Shiny's head pokes out, and he yells back, "Lieutenant Shiny, sentry, returning from off-base pass." Gramps yelled back from about 30s away, "Advance and be recognized," meaning, "Of course I can't see you clearly where you are, come to where I can see you." Or else. Frustrated, Lieutenant, Shiny opened the door, dangerously close to the surface of the awaiting mud, and leaned out so the light caught him. He was in uniform, of course, all duded up as Gramps said, and wearing decidedly non-regulation boots with his uniform that came up to his knees, and were polished to the sort of shiny finish that NASA uses on telescope mirrors today. He yelled back again who he was and was obviously frustrated and hoping he hadn't just gotten stuck, but he also hadn't gotten any closer as he'd been commanded to by the very armed sentry that had just challenged him, and on some level he knew it. Next steps. Racking around into the chamber as a warning, and a repeated command, "Advance," and be recognized. Desperate, but knowing there was no way out of this other than forward, Lieutenant Shiny stood on the floorboards of the car, now just level with the surface and starting to inch closer to it slowly, and declared himself again, and was greeted with a loaded weapon pointed at him, and a repeated with a loaded weapon pointed at him, and a repeated command to advance and be recognized. I asked Gramps once what would have happened if he'd actually shot Lieutenant Shiny, and he always said he was pretty sure he'd have been court-martialed at the least, but god damn it if he wasn't determined to make a point about this. And so Lieutenant Shiny finally stepped off the sideboards of his car, sank immediately to his knees with muddy goo slopping over the top of his boots, and sadly advanced. Gramps let him get 2 steps forward before shouldering his weapon again and snapping him the smartest of salutes. "Sir, thank you. You may proceed, Lieutenant." Shiny sadly got back into his car and valiantly tried to get it moving again, to no avail. Mud was everywhere. inside and out, mud flying everywhere as his wheels spun. And eventually, he gave up and trudged off to his barracks. By morning, they ended up having to use 2 jeeps and a come-along to yank that car out of the mud. Graham said that he got talked to briefly by someone above Lieutenant Shiny and basically told don't do that again, but he said nothing much further came of it. Oddly enough, the subject of sharpening drill bits never came up again, and Lieutenant Shiny was always very careful about staying out of the maintenance bay unless he was going to be taking an aircraft up. And that's a wrap on today's episode at Crown Corner. I hope these stories left you amazed, inspired, or maybe even a little more knowledgeable about the quirky side of life. Remember, life is full of surprises, and who knows, maybe one day your story will be featured here. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next video.